explain the feminine genius and to look at the challenges women face today, we're joined by Dr. Gabrielle Gerges, a postdoctoral fellow at the Ethics and Public Policy Center, and Serena Sigolito, editor of The Public Discourse, the journal of the Witherspoon Institute. Ladies, thank you so much for joining me. Gabrielle, let's start with you. We just heard about the drop in the U.S. birth rate. What are your thoughts on the American Families Plan and how they want to address this crisis in the new administration?
Yes, thanks so much for that question. The American Families Plan, as I understand it, has several features that would be designed to target the dropping birth rate. One is that it offers families paid leave from their employment. It offers tax credits for the birth of children, and it also wants to establish universal pre-K and childcare. I would be sympathetic to things like paid leave and tax credits, but I think we should be really wary of a feature like universal pre-K and childcare, because that really incentivizes two-income households, and it builds in the assumption that everyone should be working rather than be allowed the freedom of choice to discern whether they're actually called to spend their time at home as a mother, primarily taking care of their children.
Serena, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I completely agree with Gabby. The problem with this plan is that it's not treating all families equally. It's not allowing each family to take the time to discern what is really right for them, whether that's having the mother stay home, which is often the case, or occasionally the father stay home, or just different creative ways that they can choose to structure their family life in order to follow their own particular vocations. So, I agree that the refundable child tax credits are a good thing, because those are sort of choice neutral, and those can go to a family whether or not they choose to put their child into a paid daycare program. And there are some really interesting new versions of this plan that are coming up from people like Senator Mitt Romney and various think tanks on the right that would avoid some of these problems with Biden's plan. So when the American Family Act expires at the end of this year, I think we'll see some really interesting conversation and debate about how to go forward with this.
And this affects women specifically. Serena, you closed your recent piece on Catholic feminism mentioning that the world needs women, physical mothers and spiritual mothers, married women, single women, religious sisters, working women and homemakers. How does the Catholic Church foster that?
Well, I think the Catholic Church is really unique and has something so important and so beautiful to offer the world, because we simultaneously uphold the truth of complementarity and the fact that who we are as body soul composites matters, and that it is a different experience of being in the world and of being a created being to be a man or a woman. So we uphold that and really hold a place for the dignity and the essential gifts of women as women. But we also see that a lot of the regressive or rigid cultural stereotypes where we're saying, all women must be X, Y, or Z, barefoot and pregnant in the kitchen, or whatever it may be from a particular era. That's not really, something that's coming straight from God or from the nature of reality. Each woman, again, has their own gifts and talents, and some women have vocations to work outside of the home. So I think Catholicism really has the tools there to unlock just a treasure trove of resources as women are discerning their own personal vocations and what's right for their family.
Gabrielle, you're a mom too. You're also a PhD. How does the feminine genius come into play in discussions about motherhood and Catholicism?
Yeah, I actually think that we have to actually give contemporary feminism some credit for helping us to think more about the feminine genius and how we recognize that. Because the contemporary feminism has put such strong emphasis on autonomy and women's decision-making about their choices, decision-making about whether they're going to work in or outside the home. And feminine genius is a concept that forces us to think about all of the different ways that women are really capable of serving the world, not just in the home, but outside of it. And so I think by drawing our attention to all of the ways, it's sort of like they work together, even though we often kind of see them in opposition to each other.
That's right. Well, let's keep talking then about women in the workforce. Serena, in 100 years of women in the workforce, the top occupation remains domestic service and teaching. But we're also seeing a breaking in the glass ceiling with more women in corporate positions. Are these two then mutually exclusive?
I don't think they're mutually exclusive. I think it's a matter of preferences. And, you know, again, each woman has a unique vocation, but we can say that certain traits are often more characteristic of one sex or the other. So this desire to be nurturing others and caring for their development is something that we find really often in women, in part because of our physical embodied experience of being able to be receptive to carrying another being within us. And so I don't think that we'll ever see men and women have exactly the same preferences. So I don't think we should be striving for 50-50 representation in all of these different areas of the economy. But I do think that we should be striving for openness for those to be viable career options. If a woman is called to really have a demanding job as a CEO and to be working to make change on that level, that should be a path that is open to her because she has important gifts to give and to supplement what has been traditionally a male-dominated industry.
And is that what you define as this new Catholic feminism, this idea that women don't experience their femininity or their desires in a monolith? Is that something that's new, happening now?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. It's interesting, there are all of these different waves of secular feminism more generally. And we saw, especially with some of the second wave feminists and, you think even of someone like Sheryl Sandberg, and we have this lean in concept where there's a real sense that women need to be out there proving themselves and, that we can do anything a man can do and sort of conforming our life scripts to a fundamentally male model of this ideal worker model. And I think with my generation of sort of women who were born when a lot of the gains of feminism had already been put in place, there's not this sort of urgency and sense that we need to be out there fighting on men's terms. I think there's more kind of internal discernment and thinking, well, what do I really want? So there's a lot more interest in part-time work. The pandemic has actually accelerated.
That's right. We saw that in the Atlantic with the conversation about women leaning out and deciding that part-time work and being at home was important.
Yes, and that is one trend that I think will continue to accelerate. I've done a lot of research and interviews on this, and consistently in polling and things, women rate part-time work as their ideal option. So as that's becoming more and more feasible, especially with remote work, I think we're going to see more and more of that happening.
Let's then turn to the biology of motherhood. Gabrielle, Representative Cori Bush referred to birthing people in a hearing on racial justice this week, and she was talking about something that's very important: care for minority women and protecting Black mothers. But her controversial language was trending on Twitter. Let's take a listen.
I am committed to doing the absolute most to protect Black mothers, to protect Black babies, to protect Black birthing people, and to save lives. Thank you, and I yield back.
So then, Gabby, how are these emerging language changes, birthing people, problematic for mothers?
Well, I'm happy to hear that Representative Bush still felt compelled to use the term mothers when she was talking about birthing. But I think that the pushes like that to change the language are really an insult to the dignity of motherhood and of human beings generally, because they force us to narrow in on only one aspect of motherhood, which is the biological aspect, right? Like if we suddenly decided that we were going to refer to men who father children as inseminators, right, we would think that there was something really problematic about that, and we would think that we were in a dystopian world, right? So we need to have language that recognizes that there are multiple dimensions to motherhood. There's cultural, familial, historical, and we shouldn't have this kind of reductionist approach to the way we talk about the reality.
And there are policy realities to this as well. You've written about the Equality Act and the particular effects it has on motherhood. Can you describe that for us?
Yeah, sure. I think so. The Equality Act more or less erases motherhood as a kind of distinct and stable category. And so the problem with that erasure is that it's going to lead to the whole components of the infrastructure that our society has built up to help women, but in healthcare, you could think about needing to have female-only sections of a hospital, or the right of women to ask for a biologically female medical provider, right, say for their gynecologist, or in prisons where there are ours, we have it segregated by sex, even shelters for mothers who have been abandoned by an abusive husband. All of those things are completely vulnerable under the Equality Act, simply because it does away with that critical category.
Serena, any closing thoughts on that, the Equality Act and motherhood?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just emblematic of a larger cultural shift that we're seeing with, the transgender movement in particular. And that really, I worry in particular about adolescent girls because we have seen, waves of rapid onset gender dysphoria. And so kind of by buying into this idea that your body and your soul are separate things and that you can have a female soul and a male body and vice versa, we're really opening the door to a lot of, dangerous ideas that can cause young girls in particular to reject their bodies and, there's just a lot of kind of hidden misogyny in there that is really, really harmful and doesn't do them the service of helping them understand the beauty of how they were created and how they are able to give the world what's inside of them, not in spite of, but because of who they are as young women.
As young women, that's right. Thank you, both of you, for joining us for this important discussion, and happy Mother's Day.